Move second d2 to d3, d5, knight d2, e5, knight f3, bishop d6, both sides develop the pieces. In this position white has two moves, d4 and g3. Let's start with the move g3. Knight f6, bishop g2, castle castle, rook e8, rook e1, knight bd7. And here white has two options. There is one very sharp option and one positional approach. a4 is the positional approach. And black can equalize as follows. a5, b3, d4, knight c4, bishop c7, bishop a3, b5, black creates immediate counterplay. A takes, c takes, knight d6, takes, rook a6, bishop a3 and rook c6. With the obvious idea to go queen c7, double on the c file, maybe even triple on the c file, bring the rook e8 to c8 at some point, and the pawn on c2 is a target and black will put it under severe pressure. Black might also consider to go b4 to further limit the options of the c2 pawn. Black is very fine in this position, maybe he's already slightly better. Instead of a4, white can also play d4, which is very sharp. We take, knight takes, rook takes, f5. Now, if white retreats his rook, say rook e1, there is e4 and black is already for choice. Instead, white plays bishop g5, attacking our queen. And we don't move it. We take on e4. Bishop d8 takes f3, and it turns out that both white bishops are hanging and one of them will get lost. D takes e5, bishop takes, queen takes f3, rook takes d8. And here, of course, white has many options. Let's say queen e3, rook f8, bishop h3, bishop f6, rook d1 and knight b6. And here it's about time we took stock. Black has got a knight, a bishop and a rook for white's queen and a pawn. How is this position to be, how should it be evaluated? I think the black is completely fine. Objectively the position is around equal. Both sides can play for a win, but I pretty much like black's chances, connected with the two minor pieces and the rook. Black has solved his problems. This is about it for second d3, pardon. The next move we are checking is the move second knight c3, d5 and queen e2. This is a variation recommended as a prize weapon by Grandmaster Hushinwit in his excellent series dedicated to the Caro-Kann. Obviously he analyzes this opening from the white side. And objectively white does not get anything here, obviously, because, yeah, white doesn't really fight for the center. However, the position is unclear. It's not that black gets an advantage or anything. It's a double-edged position where both sides can play for a win. d4, knight d1, e5, g3, c5, d3, bishop d6, f4, knight c6. Here white has two options, knight f3 or bishop g2. If bishop g2, we take on f4, g takes, knight ge7, knight f2, castle, knight f3 and f6. And this position is already a bit better for black. The idea is bishop e6 followed by bishop f7 in case white goes f5. The bishop is a very strong piece on the diagonal a2 g8, as it supports the desired break c5 to c4. and white needs to create something on the king's side, but it is not clear how white will achieve that. I think that black is very fine here. Instead, the move knight f3 makes more sense. Knight g7, f5, f6, bishop g2, bishop d7, castles, queen c7, knight f2, castle, bishop d2, king b8. Now, what are the plans in this position? White will try to play g4, h4 and g5. Black, on the other hand, will play b5, rook c8 and c4. On the first glance it might seem a bit strange that both sides are pushing the pawns that are protecting the respective king. But it makes a lot of sense, because black can never really play on the king's side. Moves like g6 would only weaken the position. White cannot really play on the queen's side. Moves as c3 would be weakening for white. That means that both sides can actually push their pawns in front of their king without getting punished. This position is double-edged and unclear. Both sides can play for a win. The last move we are going to have a look at is the move second knight e2, a favorite of Lawrence Strand's. d5, e5, bishop f5, knight d4, bishop g6, h4, h5, e6. This is the whole point of white's play. White will weaken the black structure, but white spends so many tempi that black can actually afford to give up his right to castle. Knight f6. White has two moves, knight c3 and knight f3. If knight f3, queen d6, ef7, and now king takes f7. As I said earlier, it is not a big deal in this variation to make a king move. d4, knight bd7, bishop d3. If white plays queen e2, there is the move knight g4, which is very strong, because now white can't do anything about e5 and rook e8. The white king on e1 is very bad and white has no development. Black is already better. If 10, bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes, and e5, yet again, opening up the position. White's king is still stuck on the center, black is very fine. 7 knight c3 is the more reasonable move. And here black has two moves. He can play queen d6, which is completely fine. There's no reason not to play it. However, my main move is f takes e6. White has two moves again, queen e2 and e5. If white plays queen e2, black can sacrifice two pawns for the initiative. e5. White must take, knight d7 with tempo. Queen g3, bishop f7, knight f3, and yet again e5, yet again a pawn sacrifice. Knight takes, takes, bishop e7, d4, knight g4, queen f5, castle, bishop e2, and queen b6. And it's about time we took stock here. Black has very active pieces. The rook on a8, which is not active yet, will join the party on e8. White's king is still on e1, his pieces are not really well developed or coordinated, and black has more than enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn. In fact, black is already a bit better, and in a practical game this position is very, very unpleasant to play for white. Which is why knight takes e6 makes more sense. Queen d6. White has two moves, queen e2 and knight g5. If queen e2, then we can play d4, knight b1, and we can actually cash in the pawn. Bishop takes c2. And after d3 we can take. Because after queen takes d3, the knight on e6 would be hanging. knight g5 is the more reasonable move. e5, d4, knight bd7, bishop d3. If g3, we go knight g4. Because white's idea was to develop the bishop on h3, with knight g4 we cut it a bit off. Now bishop h3 would not make that much sense anymore. So bishop d3, e4, bishop e2, and bishop f5. And this position is very fine for black.